During my senior year of high school, I made the worst mistake of my entire life. A mistake that I credit every following regret to. A mistake that I obsess over every night. A mistake that always lingers in the back of my head. It was a game, the blinking game. It started in December when I had just moved across the country to a rural town in Kansas. It was for my father's work, something like that. A decision that I wasn't too keen about after having to transfer schools in the middle of the semester. I was en route to graduate top of my class previously, and I never considered changing that mindset until he came into my life. I've repeated the first day of my life a million times. I should have chosen the chair in the front, or maybe one by the window, any other place than besides him. But instead, I dropped my backpack next to his desk and sat down beside him. "Hi, my name's Aaron," were his first words. Soon enough, Aaron and I became fast friends. We shared almost everything in common, from our interests to our hobbies, talking all through class. One day after school, on our typical walk home together, Aaron stopped and looked to his left, to an old ranch that stood vacant in the middle of a field. "Have you been yet?" Aaron asked, his eyes still stuck on the house. I shook my head. It was an old farm back in the day, owned by the Ravenwood family. We should check it out. Aaron could sense my curiosity, and he let his backpack fall off his shoulders before stepping over the worn chicken wire fence and onto the yellow grass. "Are you coming?" he asked, and I couldn't say no. The house was surrounded by an old and unkept cornfield. The corn had long rotted, and as I waded through the yellow stalks, it felt like they were wrapping around my legs, pulling me closer. The farmhouse shared a similar face of age, its wood walls having long decayed, windows boarded up or broken into after years of vacancy. After stepping onto the porch, I turned around, facing back to the main road through the obscurity of corn, but it was as if the stalks blinded everything, and the street was almost entirely invisible. Aaron caught up to me before peeling the aged door from its long, undisturbed place against the frame. The inside wasn't much different from the outside. Slanted wooden beams shot across a decrepit foyer, leading me further into the house. In what remained of the living room, graffiti was painted across the walls, trailing up the stairs and into the hallway above. Aaron motioned for me to follow him up, and I rashly obeyed. "This is where the game begins," he said, pointing to a doorway at the top of the stairs. I moved forward and hesitantly looked inside. The room was empty, spare a mountain of corn sitting on the windowsill. At the base of the stack, the corn was black and rotted, and at the top, it looked similar to the appearance of those I just saw outside. People still do it, I guess. "Do what?" I asked. "The blinking game." Aaron approached the corn before letting his backpack slip off his shoulder. From the side pocket, he took out an ear of corn before placing it on the top of the stack. "Do you want to join?" Aaron asked. "It's my first time, too." I paused before nodding, but I had no idea what that game even was. He pulled out another ear and placed it on top. "The game is simple. Starting now, every time you blink, she gets closer. No one knows where she starts, but if you start to see blackness obscure your vision, you know she's near. If blackness consumes your vision entirely, she wins." I couldn't understand anything Aaron was telling me. "Who's she?" "Ida Ravenhood, the daughter who was buried alive by her own family in the 19th century, or so the story goes. Just remember, you can't leave the game. Either Ida wins or you die. You can't let her catch up to you. She moves every time you blink." "What?" "Look, it's not difficult. Don't blink that much, because every time you do, she gets closer. Just avoid her. When you see a black object, that's her, and you need to get away. And remember, you can't talk about this to anyone. It's a rule of the game, and if you break it, you'll disappear." I blinked. "You can't do that anymore, Steven. She's already getting closer to you. Look at me, I'm not blinking. She's gonna get to you first." Aaron rushed out of the room before flying down the stairs and out the front door. I blinked again. I didn't believe his stupid game. Days passed with no incident. While Aaron continued to occupy all class time talking about it, the game had almost slipped from my mind otherwise. I never felt any fear. But after a week went by, I first encountered it. I then realized that I had a lot to fear. I was in the hallway leaving school for the day when I saw a black shadow in front of me. It stood at the end of the corridor, large and threatening, almost like an ink blotch on a piece of paper. It had no form, it was incomprehensible. I blinked, trying to understand it, but it moved closer, occupying more of my vision. I rushed out of the main doors and outside, where I found Aaron starting home. He picked up on my urgency, his eyes following mine as they darted back inside, quickly able to understand where my explanation fell short. "You saw her," Aaron said, barely able to complete his sentence before I grabbed his arm and started pulling him forward. I needed to get away as far as possible from the figure. We rushed forward, running past the farm into my house not too far after. I left Aaron at the door and rushed up to my room, unable to comprehend what I had just witnessed. I didn't experience any more of the blackness that afternoon. Not only that, but I found a loophole too, where if I slept it only counted as one blink. So that week I spent most of my time away from school and the black figure. When I did return to school some days, I'd see Aaron, who had long abandoned his usual wittiness in place of a more silent, tired conduct. When I talked to him, he too expressed encounters with the shadow, explaining that he would often have to leave school halfway through the day just to get away from it. After a few months had passed, I had gotten to a point of depression where I wasn't able to make myself get out of bed, and instead I opted to sleep for most of the day, hoping that I wouldn't encounter the figure. I had occasional run-ins when my parent had forced me to attend school, and in those situations I had always skipped, opting to walk across the town to gain some distance from it. I had asked Aaron on multiple occasions about the figure, about a cure, about what happened if it caught you. He mainly brushed off my concerns until one day he finally sat me down to answer all of my questions. There isn't a cure, not that I'm aware of. Everyone who has ever participated in the game has either died, disappeared, or continues to run from it like cat and mouse. And that's why you don't want it to catch you, because if it does, then your fate is worse than anything imaginable. "Then why did you even play it in the first place?" I asked, moving my lunch tray out of the way. "Why did you even make me play if you knew how bad it was?" "It was the thrill. I grew up here. I've heard stories of the blinking games repeated 1,000,000 times over the years. You saw that stack of corn, Steven. You know how much people want to play it." "You're a fucking idiot." "I know that now, Steven." And that was the last conversation I ever had with Aaron. I barely graduated a few months later, receiving some of the worst grades I would have ever imagined receiving. But I was fortunate enough to be accepted into a university abroad, where I could study without the fear of encountering the entity for a long time. I thought I had finally ended it. A few months following, I got a message on Facebook from a friend in high school with a link to a news article. I clicked it unsuspectingly, only to be brought to a website with Aaron's face plastered across the page with the words, "Missing 22-year-old found dead," beside him. I scrolled down, my eyes skimming the words, before I came across a photo. It was an aerial shot looking down into a field where a black bag was laid across the earth almost forebodingly. It was the Ravenwood Ranch. Aaron had returned. That was a week ago, and there aren't any more updates about him. I've been sleeping most days since, hoping to forget about him, but I can't. For a while, I wondered if the game had died with him, freeing me of the figure and all it represents. But last night, when I was in the kitchen, I saw it. The horrible blackness occupying the doorway, staring at me. It had been 2 years since our last encounter. I managed to flee to a hotel nearby where I'm typing all this out, hoping not to even see a glimpse of it. My eyes hurt, and I don't know what to do anymore. I just want to blink.